Okay, so we are back, and our light map is complete, but a little bit of work has taken place between the last time we saw you and now.
Right. The when we baked out our first settings with the light map, as you saw when we first came in, those numbers were based off of a forest scene that didn't really have snow on the ground. So the results that we got weren't quite what we expected. And we started tweaking, and the snow actually presented a bit of a problem as we were going along. So trying to get something that looked like a snowy ground with the subsurface scattering that you would get, the bounce light we got to that point. It actually kind of looked good in certain spots.
Right, it was a balancing act between finding a good place for the shadows to be dark without blowing out the snow and making it look like you should be going snowblind while you're walking around.
Right, and because it is an overcast day, the point of getting the snow as overblown as it was in the open areas made it quite tricky, and we kept going back and forth a few times more than we really wanted to. But eventually we got this scene, which still isn't perfect, but we decided to settle here without spending 3 days trying to get the lighting right.
Now, what I'm going to do real quick is bring back in the light mapping panel you see here, and we're going to go over, very briefly, the changes that we made to the settings. So, Lee, what did we do here?
All right, well, one of the things that we did was increase our bounces from 1 to 2, trying to get a little bit more light thrown around the scene to simulate the bounce light and subsurface that we would get from the snow. The other thing that we did was we took the skylight intensity and bumped it up from 0.25 to 1. We took our bounce boost, went from 1 to 1.25, and bounce intensity to 1.1. Now, if we had the time, I would continue to take these three numbers and increase them at increments a little bit at a time until I got what I was looking at and still not blowing out the scene.
Sure. Now, we also did turn on ambient occlusion.
Well, we had it the first time. We turned it off to speed up the renders.
Right.
So I believe in the very first video, these were the settings we had on ambient occlusion.
Yeah. All right, so that's just a quick rundown of the changes we made, and let's take a quick look at our results. So I'll just kind of pass through here. So the ravine is very dark, but it is kind of a recessed area, so that makes sense. And when we get to these areas that are exposed to our light, you'll notice we're not getting any crazy blowout, which was our problem with the first result that we had at the end of the previous video. We had a lot of areas that were just super bright white, and you could no longer see what was going on.
Right. And if you go down to where our hot spring is, there is another change that we had to make kind of on the fly. Now, with light mapping, occasionally there will be artifacts where objects just will not pick up the light. And you can kind of see it with some of the rocks down at the bottom where they're dark. We had some rocks that were just completely black, and they did not match up with the light whatsoever. So the easiest way to deal with them was to actually remove them from the scene altogether.
That's right. Now, in other circumstances, like when you're designing your own games, you might be able to work that out using some actual polygon meshes that get placed, as opposed to these automatic decorative meshes which are painted right onto the terrain.
Right. They're picking up the information from the terrain's light map, so depending on where they're placed in relation to where the shadows are shown on that map, they can cause artifacting or misread information.
That's right. So let's go ahead and just kind of play through this. Now, I realize I move a lot more slowly here, but we can see that we have nice soft shadowing everywhere, and this is all pre-baked shadowing. We still have our light on, however, because our trees are vertex lit, and they're looking for that light information to be coming from the sun. Otherwise, our trees will pretty much be strictly black, and we don't want that.
Right. If you look at the bottom, particularly of the trees, you can start to see the brighter green that's getting picked up, and that is because we still have a light that is active inside of our scene.
That's right. Now, incidentally, having these really nice shadows starts to really point out problems where, you know, our trees are kind of sticking up out of the ground and floating a little bit. But again, this is just kind of a demonstration level to expose you to some of the tools. If you were doing this for real and that was really driving you crazy, you can do the technique that Lee mentioned in a previous video, where you could duplicate your terrain and have a second copy sitting just beneath the existing surface and actually paint your trees onto the lower surface.
Right, and another option that you could do is you could hide it with meshes. You could actually make a mesh of a snowdrift or mounting up snow, give it the same texture as that you're using on your terrain for snow, and then match up its UVs so it looks about the same scale, and you can use that and place those around the bases of the tree to hide those artifacts.
And that would look amazing. But again, we were just doing this to kind of expose you to the tools and get you in tune with how to paint trees and whatnot inside of Unity. So here's our hot spring, and you can see even though we have those darker rocks in the background, I mean, our Steam is going to try to cover those up for us, and that'll make things look a little bit nicer. Now let's run back up here. And I love how those shadows turned out. They're really adding a lot to the overall environment.
And if you're really a stickler, those shadows might still seem a little bit noisy to you. That is all just a matter of how many samples that we've used, as well as how many final gather rays that we were casting. And those numbers can be increased, but every time you increase numbers, you're going to incur more of a penalty when you're actually baking out those light maps. I believe this one turned out to be about 44 minutes when it was all said and done.
Yeah, so I mean, it does take a while to bake these out. Always keep that in mind. Now, with all of that taken care of, the last thing I want to demonstrate is showing how to take this game and package it up so that you could give it to your friends. Now, before we do that, I am going to throw out this very kind of generic disclaimer. The level that we have created is just for demonstration of tools. It is not particularly optimized. It is a very heavy level. All of these trees, all these particles are pretty heavy on your processor.
Right. If you remember, when we put the snow in, our snow is one single particle system that covers the entire level.
Yeah.
So this thing is generating all kinds of polygons to hold our sprites. So that in itself is quite heavy. The fire and the steam is a little bit more light in terms of particles, so that's not really as bad. But if you look at it, we probably have several hundred, if not 1,000 plus trees in our scene.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of those, if you don't optimize the settings for your train, can incur quite a penalty while you're trying to play the game. If you were to look at our stats, if you want to jump over to that real quick.
Well, if we jump over to Game and then click on the Stats button in the upper right-hand corner.
Right, and if you start playing around, if you look particularly under our draw calls, we get between about 250 up to 1,000 draw calls depending on what we're looking at, especially when the snow starts falling. And depending on where we're looking at any particular time, our polygons will go from, or our triangles will go from about 100,000 to a little bit over 1,000,000 triangles. So that is definitely an area where we could look at optimizing stuff.
And optimizing is something that I don't want to get too heavily into in this kind of introductory series. Again, I just want to show you how to build levels. Now, we do have some videos that are coming up that talk a lot about some optimization processes and controlling what it is that is actually rendered. Now, with all that said, let's take a look at how we can package all of this up. If we go under the File menu, we have two options here. We have Build Settings and we have Build and Run. Now I'm going to go under Build Settings, though if this is the first time you've done this, the both of the menu options will take you to the exact same place, and that is this window. Now this allows you to control what it is you're going to be building out. By default, you can create something for the web player, or you can create a PC or Mac standalone program. You cannot, by default, create games or whatnot for iOS, for the iPad or iPhone, for Android. The 360, PS3, or Wii, you need to license Unity to do that.
Correct. You actually have to buy the special license for each one of those operating systems if your end target is one of those platforms.
That's right. But we can make PC and Mac standalones real easy. Now, already up here in my Scenes in Build window, we can see our scene. Since we only have one scene, we don't really need to worry about this, but if you don't see that already and you're following along, click the Add Current button, and that will make your current level appear. Now, I've just made it appear twice, so we don't really... actually, I think I've got a different world visible right now, so now we have two levels visible.
Right. What we ended up doing is when we're finished with the light mapping, we saved out another copy.
It's called Save As.
Yep, we saved it out as a separate copy because this final level is what we're using to demonstrate things in the next part of this series, where we're actually going back and building the videos for the referencing to help you learn what each component is in a little bit more depth than we did with this intro set of demo videos.
So what I'm going to do is just uncheck the scenes that we're not going to be using, and we'll just go ahead and leave our demo snow world available in here.
And I believe if you right click on it, you can actually remove that too.
And no, we can't actually.
No.
Not in this window. Now, there are a lot of windows where we can right-click and remove stuff, but not in here. So we'll go ahead and leave our target platform set to Windows. We are not making a debug build. We can set up some player settings in here, which if we check this out, this is exactly the same player settings that we can access underneath the Edit menu, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit more depth later. If you go under Edit, jump down to Project Settings and go to Player.
Right. We might want to change up the screen width and height.
Yeah, that is pretty low.
Yeah.
We could set that to, let's just do 800 by 600. So there's a pretty good resolution. When we're finished, we can just click Build, or we can click Build and Run. And the difference between the two is Build will just build this out and save it out as an executable and a folder containing all of the files that we need to run our game. Where Build and Run will do that too, but then it'll actually run the game so we can see the result. So let's click Build and Run. And let's see, we originally were going to call this Snow World, but let's call this Snow World 2 and click Save. Now, this will take just a moment. Compiling scripts will be quick. We don't really have very many. None that we created anyway. And we're already done. So we get our little config window allowing us to choose what screen resolution we'd like to see. And we can choose our graphics quality. Let's just go ahead and click play with what we've got. And here we are inside our game. And it really is that easy. I mean, at this point, we could take this little exe file and its associated folder. We could zip it up and send it all to all of our friends. And they could play the game that we've put together. So with that, we have now created our very first Unity level, as I reach up here and spin the camera around just to make everybody dizzy. We've covered a lot of different topics, ranging from terrain to texturing your terrain to drawing out all of these trees, adding in things like water, bringing in meshes from external applications, and I hope that in going through all of this, you've become more familiar with utilizing the Unity interface and some of the tools you have at your disposal, which is the real end goal here. Even though, as we mentioned earlier, the level that we've created is certainly not the most optimized, computer-friendly game level that you've ever seen in your entire life. It is a good way for you to get your hands dirty and really get in and start using the Unity interface, especially if you've never seen it before.
Right. This was just a demo level, so we were showing you how to quickly put something together. For your own level, you can take as much time as you want and really go back and tweak until you get something that looks fantastic.
And on the flip side of that, while I don't ever like suggesting to anybody that they spend a lot of time making games and levels that are too heavy or unoptimized or clunky or unwieldy, if your end goal is just visualization and you already know that your target computer is going to be powerful enough, you're not trying to do a mass-produced game that's going to be let out there into the wild, so to speak, there's no reason you can't just work this way. Especially like if you have a job to say, hey, I need you to create a visualization of this house and here's all of the landscaping we need around it, you can just build it if you know exactly what kind of computer system you're going to be building and that it'll handle that. Right. Anyway, now that I think we've thrown all of that out there and beaten a dead horse in terms of the optimization world, that's going to wrap things up for this particular example. I just wanted to thank you for following along and mention that everything that we've been showing here is going to be very useful as you continue on with your Unity education. Make sure that you're starting to get very familiar with zipping around the interface, navigating your viewports, where to find the important parts of the interface, such as the project view, the hierarchy view, the inspector view. We will be going over each one of these aspects of the user interface in a lot more depth in upcoming videos, and you're going to be seeing them a lot more as you go through more advanced Unity training here from 3D Buzz. For instance, coming up soon, we have a training course that is going to be strictly for our member sponsor subscribers over how to build your own MMO. And I know we've mentioned that a few times throughout these videos, but if you wanted to take something like that on, a much more advanced topic like that, you really need to understand this interface before going in.
Right. This video series, as well as a couple of the others that we're putting together, have all been designed with that as the end goal. These things are the forerunners of what's coming. It's basically to get you familiar with the interface and take you from not knowing anything all the way up to getting you ready to get into the MMO course and tackle that really, really large project.
That's right. So that is going to wrap things up for this video and this project. Thanks a lot.